Over the last decade, Kenya has been on the front line of the climate crisis. The East African country has battled everything from severe drought to devastating floods. But 3 young female activists are finding creative solutions to spread awareness and address the effects of the climate crisis in their home country. For Abigail Kima, storytelling is a critical part of her climate activism. Through blogs, vlogs, and social media, her life's work is dedicated to spreading awareness about climate change to Africans and the world.
Hello and welcome to the Hali Hewa Podcast with your host Abigail Kima. Today we are live at the Africa Climate Summit.
Her podcast, Hali Hewa, which means climate in Swahili, focuses on making the complexities of climate change more relatable. Abigail films each episode and also posts it on YouTube. She interviews everyone from grassroots activists to policymakers and experts.
I went for a podcast because it's something that anyone can listen to when you're driving, when you're working. I noticed that a lot of Kenyans love visuals, so that's why I also wanted to have the YouTube part of it so that someone can sit in their living room and just watch as we have these conversations. And then also in terms of resources, it didn't require much from me at that point because as well as a young person, you don't have a lot of resources at that point when you're starting out. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce to you a new series called Small Changes, Big Impact.
Today, she is interviewing climate researcher Daisy Mosso about climate pollutants that many of us overlook.
So kindly tell us briefly about who you are and what you do.
My name is Daisy Mosso. I'm the Project and Climate Research Coordinator of the Africa Short-Lived Climate Pollutants Project.
Abigail grew up in Kenya's Rift Valley, a region that's been hit hard by the climate crisis. Witnessing how extreme weather devastated the land and displaced communities around her home has inspired her to act.
When you come home, for example, the northern part of Kenya right now has been experiencing drought for about 2 years, and I had an opportunity to visit such homes. And you go into households who only have 1 meal a day, or sometimes there's none. And I remember going into homesteads that have lost about 50 herds of cattle, and they have nothing to their name. So what do you do to such communities that have already lost their main source of livelihood?
What she decided she could do for these communities is share their stories with governments and business leaders at last year's COP27.
Let me tell you something I know to be real. Earlier this year, I witnessed 2 young girls, a little over 6 years old, fetching water from a dirty water pan. I watched as they filled their 20-liter jerrycan, which once full, weighed almost as much as them. Together, these little girls pushed it for more than a kilometer along a road littered with rotting animal carcasses, the dead bodies of cattle that have neither pasture nor water to sustain them. I witnessed this in Isiolo County, the northern part of Kenya. But this is the reality for many communities in Africa who find themselves in the front line of the climate crisis today.
It is these kinds of stories that motivated Abigail to become a voice, not just for Kenyans, but for all Africans affected by climate change.
It was so difficult. I remember I recorded, voice notes on a daily basis just to, ease the emotions that I felt. And at that point, it really motivated me to keep doing this work, because then I'm really truly I'm telling stories of real people with real lives going through real experiences. And oftentimes when you go to these platforms, we are only talking about climate change in terms of numbers and statistics that look so complicated, but when you tell stories of real people, then it means we hopefully want to inspire change from a human aspect.
I have the pleasure of hosting a very lovely guest, and I'm gonna invite her to introduce herself. Welcome.
Through her podcast, Abigail hopes to inspire action and change, even on a small scale. She believes in the importance of having her voice, an African voice, telling this story.
I think it's definitely powerful to have, you know, an African voice speaking about African experiences, because I mean, we've had enough experiences where people come and take our stories and, you know, go and tell them, and usually you don't really have control over how the story will flow. But then when it's someone that looks like me, someone who has gone through an experience like me, then it comes with a bit more experience and also validation, knowing that you're speaking from a personal experience and not just an experience that you saw.